Welcome to Storytime with Tallulah. Today's reading comes from r/ProRevenge. Our first story is titled, Pastor Lies, Cheats, and Steals. He Gets Exactly What He Deserves. If you want to read on YouTube, that's okay with me. You can call me Caldra or OP, as my username is not easy. Sorry, I'm on mobile. Also, I'm sorry, but I need to be very vague about where this happened. The cast. Pastor Bob, not real name. Contractor, me, or OP if you want. Setup. I have been a computer technician for more than 15 years. I have worked on all kinds of computers, everything from tiny point-of-sale computers to large rack server computers. I had been attending a new-to-me church. I was trying to date a woman there. This church was her idea. That relationship crashed and burned, but that's a different story. Now we can start. It was about 5 years ago. I had just sat through a long sermon about generosity and giving to those that need help. At the end of the sermon, Pastor Bob asked for an additional donation because the church's roof needed repairs, and it would cost $20,000. That's right, 20,000 freedom dollars for a new roof. After the service, I'm talking to my date, and Pastor Bob walks over to me. I said hi, and he introduced himself. We talked a bit. Pastor Bob asks what I do for a living. I tell him I'm a computer tech with a shop. As I'm telling him, I have a feeling he already knows what I do. Pastor Bob asked me to have a look at his laptop. It's being very slow, so I agree. I turn the laptop on and I hear a clicking noise. This clues me it's probably the hard drive, but I can still access the data. This is a good thing because it means I can probably recover the data. So I tell Pastor Bob the hard drive is dying and it needs to be replaced. I also tell him I can probably recover the data. Pastor Bob asked how much it would cost to fix. I tell him for most people I would charge around $250. However, I feel I can donate my time, so I would just need $60 for a new hard drive. Pastor Bob agrees, so I write up an invoice. New hard drive, $60. Labor, $0. Data recovery, $0. And 2 to 4 days for repair. Pastor Bob signed the invoice, so I take the laptop to my shop. I open the laptop. HP, why do you use so many screws and clips? I get the hard drive out and connect it to my recovery rig. I set up the recovery to clone the data to a new hard drive, but not the new one for the laptop, a high-end storage drive. I go home after locking up the shop. Next day, Monday, I open the shop and check the recovery rig. It's working, but it will take at least 10 more hours, so I start work on the other tickets. Then at closing time, I lock up and go home. Next Tuesday, I've had Pastor Bob's laptop for 2 days. I open the shop and check my recovery rig. Good news, recovery completed, 100% data recovered. Report says hard drive developed too many bad sectors. Now I have a choice to make. I could put a 1 terabyte hard drive, $60, or 120 gig SSD, $60. Or I could pay some money myself for a 240 gigabyte SSD for $100. I decide why not and put the 240 gigabyte SSD in the laptop. I then clone all the data over from the new recovery storage drive to the new 240 gigabyte SSD. An hour later, the clone is done. So I check everything, the laptop works great and is exactly like how it was before the first hard drive died. Even the login still worked. So I call Pastor Bob and tell him his computer is done. He says that's great and he'll be here soon to get it. About 45 minutes later, Pastor Bob walks in. I show him his laptop working and much faster. He loves it and signs the pickup form. He then pays me with a check for $60. It's important he paid with a check. I do a bank run on Monday and Friday. So that Friday at the bank, I am informed that Pastor Bob's check is void. What? Why? Pastor Bob had placed a stop payment on the check. So I called him and he ignored my call. I go to church on Sunday. Pastor Bob gives a sermon about not lying. I walk up to talk to him and he avoids me. So I leave and decide I'm going to write it off. I spent $100 and some time doing something nice. A few weeks later, a customer walks in looking for a new computer. So I offer him a drink and go over his options. I'm chatting him up and he tells me he is a contractor. He mostly does siding and roofing. He is thinking about offering solar. That's why he is getting a new computer. I ask how much does a new roof cost? He says up to about $10,000, so I ask him why would someone say $20,000? He had no idea. I thought it was strange. I asked about the church. Contractor said it would have been simple and around $5,000, and he could probably do it for less. Contractor buys a nice new laptop. Sorry, the setup took so long, the revenge starts now. Something about the contractor said bugs me later. Why would Pastor Bob lie and say $20,000 for a new roof? And why would he stiff me for $60? I then remember I never cleared the recovery rig storage drive. So I check there and it's Pastor Bob's laptop data. I look around, it's slow, and I'm all caught up on repair tickets, so I decided I'm going to clone Pastor Bob's data to a second laptop. I look around a bit. He had all of his logins stored in a folder on the desktop, including his online dating logins and online poker. Did I ever mention Pastor Bob is married? I start printing his online dating messages. I look back and find Pastor Bob has been adult hugging several women from his online dating. He had been paying for his dates from the church's donation fund. I am getting angry now. Then I realized he had adult hugged the woman I was dating when I was dating her. It was then I decided to break Pastor Bob. I printed out all his dating messages and the woman he adult hugged for the last 6 months, except I refused to print the naughty pictures. It was an impressive packet. I then decided I needed copies of the packet, so I ordered 100 packets printed from a major online printer. A few days later, my order of revenge packets arrived. These revenge packets are amazing, double-sided, stapled, bound with a cover with Pastor Bob's face on it. Now the conclusion, and I think it's worth it. This church had a calendar of what the sermon might be about. A perfect Sunday was approaching. I go to church that perfect Sunday. I show up a bit late, everyone is in church, so I put a revenge packet on each car. I have a few revenge packets that are in yellow envelopes, so I put them in the mail. I sent one to all the high-ups in the church, and I sent a special packet with some of Pastor Bob's naughty pics to Pastor Bob's wife. I sent the return address to the church. I also emailed a bunch of people the revenge packet from a burner email. A couple weeks later, I went back to that church. Pastor Bob was gone, so was the wife. Several of the women were also gone, including the one I was dating. I asked one of the important people there, what happened? The answer was amazing. I was told about the revenge packet and how everyone had gotten one. The day my revenge packet appeared, the sermon Pastor Bob had given was about the evils of adultery and cheating on your wife. Thank you, church calendar. The fallout. Pastor Bob was fired and shunned. Multiple women from the church have not returned, including the one I was dating. Pastor Bob's wife is divorcing him, and she is the one that owned the house and cars. No longer Pastor Bob is now being sued by several people, including the one that fixed the roof. He never paid any of them. There was also rumors of a criminal case for embezzlement. No one has seen Bob in a while now. The church might close if they can't find a new pastor, but the church's money is very low. Apparently, he spent over $30,000 on online gambling. Too long, didn't read. Pastor lies, steals, and cheats on his wife with multiple women, gets found out and doxxed, gets fired, divorced, and arrested. And no one knows I did this to him. Notes, because you might ask. It's quite possible that several of the very young children and babies at the church were his, but I cannot confirm this. I have no idea where Bob is now. I would think still in jail. Edit. Thank you so much for the awards. It's amazing. That's crazy. That's insane that you had to go through that, and that's wow. That sounds like a very, very poo-poo person. All right, well, our next story is titled "Stingy Narcissistic Boss Negs and Skimps on Employees, so I damage his ego with some a-hole tax." Let's call my butthole boss Eugene, since his stinginess reminds me of Eugene Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants, except Krabs is nowhere near malicious. In order to display the full satisfaction of this revenge, I will have to describe a few, but not limited things, Eugene did that entitles him to being a complete poo-poo head. For the context, Eugene owns a small company that provides artistic services of some sort and never hired full-timers, which I later learned that it was due to his stinginess. Initially, when I saw the open part position, I thought it was ideal for me as I had external commitments and needed some sort of income. The job offers about $550 USD per month. I don't live in the US, this is a rough conversion, but only required me to clock in about 90 hours a month. It wasn't a very good offer, but good enough for me as I considered myself to be inexperienced in the field. Note that Eugene had seen my portfolio and knew my ability level before hiring me. The first couple of months was fine. I worked the hours I was supposed to and got paid accordingly, occasionally extending my shift at my own time due to the nature of the work, but I didn't mind. I guess Eugene saw this an advantage he could exploit later on during my employment. It is also important to note that Eugene would often ask about my well-being. How did I spend my weekends, etc. At this point in time, it all seemed like courtesy talk, so I didn't pay much attention to it. He would ask about my previous employment and my reason for leaving, which I answered honestly that their work system was unsuitable for me. This will be important later. Eugene gradually began to grow more impatient towards me after blaming me for not being able to match up to his ability. Remember when I was inexperienced, thus the pay rate? Eugene had over a decade of experience in this expertise, and he expected me to be at his level when I was only 3 months in. The stress was intense, and I began working longer hours just to keep up and produce work at the best quality I could. I was under the belief that if I worked hard enough, my effort will speak. Even though this was only a part-time position, I overcommitted my time there and took pride in my work. My external commitments were barely scraping by. I was exhausted but thought I was doing a good job until Eugene spoke to me one day. Eugene pulled me into his office and lectured me on my work etiquette, saying that I wasn't putting enough effort. He was considering letting me go. At this point, I was beyond confused. Did he really not see the effort I put in? Was I delusional in thinking that I was actually doing well and my work had been improving? I tried speaking up, but he quickly diverted the topic, telling me he knew the reason why my previous employer hated me. It was because I was lazy and uncommitted. To say I was in disbelief was an understatement. Not only did I believe I did my best with every task handed to me, Eugene had registered my flaws during casual conversations and twisted my words to his advantage. I had no idea how to react and simply asked him what he expected of me. He instantly replied that he would like me to double my hours working for him at the same monthly pay rate. His reasons? It's my fault that I am not experienced enough to produce quality work, thus it should be under my own responsibility and time to make up for it. My external commitments didn't matter, he said, as this job was my only source of income and should be kept as priority. It finally dawned on me that Eugene was a narcissistic sociopath who was only held conversations so that he can learn a person's weaknesses for his manipulation. Now, if you read my title, you will see that Eugene was not only a narcissist, but also stingy. Eugene is obsessed with maximizing his profits. Any business owner would love that, I agree. But Eugene is down to every cent in immoral and even possibly illegal ways. He would sell a service to a client and upon receiving the deposit, deliver something else. He was smart enough to keep his contracts vague for both clients and employees so that nobody could take legal actions against him. More than often, his clients would be left to wit's end as it would be too late and expensive to engage another vendor by the time they realized they had been scammed. Eugene would then demand another set of payment to deliver what he had originally promised, overcharging the client an average of 100 to 200% more than what was agreed. Eventually realizing that they'd been played, most people would be too exhausted to pursue further action and prayed for the project to be over so they didn't have to deal with his antics anymore. This inaction probably fed Eugene's ego that he could get away playing dirty every time. There are many more things I would like to rant about Eugene, but this is ProRevenge sub, not recruiting hell, so most of you would like to get to the good stuff soon. So in my country, employers are required to pay a certain amount of tax for every local employee they hire. While it is not exactly tax, it is obligated by law, and negligence will result in a hefty fine and possibly jail time. These taxes are technically contributions for the employee's retirement funds, which is payable by every employer. Employer can deduct a certain percentage of the contributions from the employee's wages. This law has its own complications since there are a certain group of people exempt from it, such as students or interns. Now, Eugene is the classic example of narcissist who thinks that he is smarter than everyone else. He felt that he was smart enough to evade the law by drafting a contract with vague details to protect himself, and was deluded enough to believe that everyone would believe him as long as he sounded convincing. In other words, he thought of people as sacks of potatoes with no opinion of their own. If anyone was to have a perspective, it had to be his way or the wrong way. I stayed in Eugene's company for about 4 months before I felt too mentally overwhelmed. On the day that I left, I called him in to check on my contribution account, and just as I had expected, Eugene hadn't paid a single cent over the past 4 months. The officer on the other end of the line asked if I would like to report this case, and guess my answer. A week later, I received an update from the contribution board saying that Eugene had disputed my case, claiming that I was only an intern and thus exempted from the law. This jerk was playing dirty as a last attempt to steal from me. As I had mentioned, Eugene thought of himself as a smart man and probably felt that the officer would rule the case in his favor since he had world-class convincing skills and his vague contract would have protected him either way. Fine, Eugene. So you think you can get away just like any other time? You must have gotten pretty confident by now. Well, not this time, Eugene. I wrote a 2-page long email to the contribution board officer with every reason and evidence I can find on how I am not an intern, like Eugene claimed. Knowing his antics, I went the extra mile to research all the exempted group and wrote every possible reason of how I am not in the category. Excessive? Yes. Worth it? Oh yeah. I didn't hear from the officer for 2 weeks, and when I finally did, he informed me that Eugene had agreed to pay my contributions. Remember when I said employers are permitted to deduct a certain percentage from employees' wages? Due to his negligence, Eugene could no longer do that and had to pay the full amount, on top of the fines it incurred along with it. If he had dutifully abided by the law, it would have only cost him a third of what he had to pay. So that's a big of a butthole tax for you, Eugene. Now that I've gotten back what I was owed, I have decided to move on, but the story did not end there. An ex-colleague of mine NJ, who is still working for Eugene, told me that during the 2 weeks I didn't hear from the officer, Eugene was busy fighting for his stand by giving every reason that I, an exempted individual. The officer, having seen my emails, soon tired of his nonsense and gave him a deadline to pay up or he'll be brought to court. NJ said he had never seen Eugene so defeated before. To top it off, it seemed like karma had finally caught up to him as he started losing more and more clients due to his unethical practices. The fine came to him when he had no clients that month, so it was a very obvious dent in his bank account. Ultimately, it was not a huge amount, but knowing Eugene's stinginess and ego, I think the damage was enough to qualify for this sub. Well, it sounds like he got what he deserved, and you got what you deserved as well in terms of being treated fairly. Anyways, thank you all for hanging out. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you enjoyed these types of videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit that bell for notifications so you know when more videos are out. Thank you all for your continued support, and I hope you're all being safe out there. If you'd like to join the Discord, the link's in the description below. We have an awesome community over there, and if you're locked inside and don't have anything to do, maybe you can go make some friends. Anyways, with that being said, we will see you next time.